move to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Swallow Churchgate Hotel. Could I ask Mark to make your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks to alter a legal agreement to enable a financial contribution to be provided to the Council instead of provision of affordable units on site as part of the Churchgate Hotel development. It should be noted that there is no formal process to make an application to modify a legal agreement less than 5 years old. However, it's considered best practice to follow the process for applications for agreements which are over 5 years old, as set out within the report. The application site here is obviously shown in red. In April 2016, the Development Management Committee approved the scheme for alterations to the hotel and infill residential development, and that's the approved layout there. As part of that scheme, the application secured the use of 9 one-bed flats for affordable housing within the replica building, which is the 1980s edition, which is to the east of the listed building, which is there. The application has been submitted because there's been no interest in securing registered social landlords to take on the affordable units. The head of community wellbeing has investigated and confirmed this is the case. Reasons for this include the flats being unaffordable, the RSLs not having any existing stock in the area, and due to experiencing management difficulties with taking on one-bedroom flats, which is in part due to vulnerable tenants being placed into them. The Council's relevant local plan policy and the adopted Affordable Housing SPD state clearly that in exceptional circumstances a financial contribution may be agreed for provision to be made on another site within the district, and that the level of the sum should be based on 75% of the current local market costs of acquiring properties of the required size and type. The Council's interim property manager undertook an appraisal to ascertain the value of the properties of the type that would have been provided on site. The applicant and officers have agreed that £200,000 per unit is appropriate, and a financial contribution of 1.35 million has been calculated and proposed on that basis. It is considered that the contribution would be able to secure affordable housing elsewhere. The legal agreement would require the contribution to be used only to enable provision of affordable housing, and the money couldn't be used for other purposes. It is felt that preference should be given to the use of the contribution in the Old Harlow ward. Whilst it is not appropriate to confirm specific suitable sites for affordable housing at this stage, as a result of the new local plan, opportunities for sites within the local area and Harlow more widely will be forthcoming as part of the local plan process. The proposal is considered to accord fully with the Council's adopted policies and guidance. It is therefore considered that the Council should approve the modification to the legal agreement to secure the financial contribution as set out on page 11 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I move on? Could I ask Councillor Charles if you would like to come forward, if you could turn the microphone on, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Well, members of the Planning Committee, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak this evening. This particular planning application has caused a lot of anger and frustration amongst Old Harlow residents and Churchgate Street residents alike. What we're discussing today is an application to modify a planning obligation to provide 9 much needed affordable housing units in my ward. Now, before we get into the debate on this, of course it is important to balance the need for executive housing and affordable housing. But this backtracking proposal by this developer seems to me to smack as something that is absolutely outrageous and something that has infuriated Churchgate Street residents who originally supported the principles of the original planning application. Now, what we've seen in this report on page 11 is an attempt to create a compromise by offering a financial contribution of 1.35 million. The real principle at stake tonight is that, yes, that is a financial contribution, but we need good quality, affordable housing in Old Harlow right now. And this would set a good principle if we were to, tonight, support the principles of the original planning application. What angers me most is when you look at the marketing material by this developer and you see some of the house prices available. A 3-bedroom home is going for over $550,000. How can a young family, say bringing up a young child, afford those sorts of prices on average wages in Harlow? No, they can't. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I'm appalled at the statement that this would make if we were to go ahead with this modification. And in fact, I'm supported by our local Member of Parliament, who's written to this committee in an open letter. Robert Halfin has said the following: with reference to the application tonight, I echo Councillor Joel Charles' objections to the proposal to remove the affordable housing element from this planning application. Affordable housing is much needed in this part of Harlow, and I am concerned about the signal which would be sent to other developers should this application be approved. What's at stake tonight is that we're setting a very, very dangerous precedent. If we are to go ahead with a financial contribution instead of much needed affordable housing, Old Harlow and Harlow as a whole will lose out. This committee should set a principle. Now, what I am aware of is there has been internal conversations in this council about seeking a way forward on this. And what I would want to know explicitly from the planning officers is why the council hasn't decided to take on these affordable housing units. Committee members, I urge you to support my cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Could I ask Mr. Crossley to come forward, please? Mr. Crossley? Again, if you could talk to the microphone, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. In the viability guidelines from the Department for Communities and Local Government, Section 106 Affordable Housing Requirements, there was a requirement that all schemes of over 10 units must have a 20% content of affordable housing. This was actually made more flexible by a subsequent High Court ruling, although it was incumbent even then upon the developer to show that the original planning requirements were no longer viable. Why is the original proposal in this case no longer viable? Has the developer made a convincing case for this? The National Policy Framework 2012 set out a presumption in favour of sustainable development, but then in 2014 there was a written ministerial statement giving a waiver for certain developments of 10 units or less. Again, the statement was quashed by the High Court, but the inference of the court ruling was that it mainly applied to small developments. The Swallow Churchgate development is much bigger than this. So why, again I ask, is the original planning approval not viable if it was viable at the time? The area of Churchgate Street this development is in is sorely in need of affordable housing, as house prices in the area, as Joel Charles has said, are going through the roof. They're well out of the reach of most young folk and young families, and bearing in mind the present government emphasis on improving social mobility, how does this square with such aspiration? To allow the waiver in return for a financial contribution is shabby, to say the least, unsympathetic. In fact, it's disgraceful. And all the goodwill that was built up from local residents has dissipated by now. There is much anger about this impending decision. So how many affordable units will the council be building, and where as financed by the contribution? How is the contribution calculated? £200,000 seems a derisory figure as a base point. Several local authorities have now set out affordable housing policies in the light of recent directives. A typical one again uses 11 units as the yardstick above which the provision of affordable units should be a requirement, except that where justified and agreed with the LPA, a financial contribution of at least equal value of median building costs may be accepted to provide affordable homes elsewhere. Has this been done, and will the units be built? And if so, when? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crossley. Okay, moving on, could I ask Mr. Branton if you could come forward, please? You could, Sarah, just turn the microphone off, press the button to take on, please.
Good evening, Chairman and Councillors. My name is Philip Branton. I'm a Director of Winster Keener Architects, and my practice has been involved in this project and site since 2014. As the officer's report states, the current planning consent and attached legal agreement require for 9 affordable homes to be provided on site, and these dwellings must be sold to a registered social landlord. The applicant has made all attempts to attract an RSL to purchase the apartments by not only making direct contact, but also by hiring a specialist housing agent to do so. After several months of searching, the applicant has concluded there is no likelihood of the on-site units being sold to an RSL, so they needed to look at alternative options. At this stage, the council also carried out their own checks and concluded the same. I discussed the situation with Mark Philpott, the case officer, and referred to the council's policy H5 and Harlow's adopted affordable housing SPD that states, in exceptional circumstances and by mutual agreement between the developer and council, a financial contribution may be agreed. This was the only available option, and the applicant and council agreed a sum of 1.35 million to be appropriate. The mechanism to deal with this variation to the legal agreement was also agreed at that stage, and some 8 months after discussions first took place with Mark, the Section 106A application was submitted. As some of you may be aware, the majority of the project is now coming to an end, and sales have begun. The current legal agreement cannot be concluded due to the lack of interest, and will restrict the sale of the units and occupation of the site. To conclude, the applicant has obtained planning permission with full intent to build and sell on-site affordable housing, but due to no housing association interest, cannot do so. They have consulted with the local planning authority and have followed the policies to the letter, agreed a sizeable financial contribution which can be linked directly to affordable housing in Old Harlow. I ask the committee to consider the contribution, their officer's recommendation and the council's own policies and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crossley. Councillors, questions of officers? Anybody? Councillor Toll?
Do we know how many registered social landlords were approached during this application to try and find out? Obviously, we're saying none will take it. And did they give reasons? Obviously, we've just heard that they were approached individually as well as an application. When it was said no, was there reasons given for the reasons why they wouldn't take the social housing on?
I've specifically spoken with the head of community wellbeing on this in considering the application, and she's specifically said that she's spoken several times to the following housing associations: Clarion, Moat, Home Group and East Thames and L&Q. And the reasons why they haven't been taken on are because, well, this is a conversion. It's not purpose-built affordable homes, so it's less affordable and attractive from a maintenance point of view and the management point of view. There are a few more reasons in the report. Oh yes, there's no existing stock from any of the registered social landlords in the area already, so again that's another managerial issue, and again they've said that there's management problems with one-bedroom flats at the moment.
Any other questions, Councillor Clark?
Was it ever discussed, or even vaguely, the 100% of the costs? And how did we get here? What is the impact and influence of the loss of the 25%?
Whilst 100% would be excellent, our local plan and SPD is very clear that the calculation should be based on 75% of the real world costs of almost walking into an estate agent and buying those types of properties. So it's set out within our SPD that that's the calculation.
Could you explain?
Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, SPD. Sorry.
Explain what the SPD
Could you
is, yes.
explain to the audience?
So that's the Affordable Housing Supplementary Planning document, which was adopted guidance that forms part of the council's local development framework. So it's something that needs to get taken into consideration when planning applications are being determined that are relevant to affordable housing.
Councillor Edwards.
There's been talk about precedents being set if particular decisions are made. As I understand, I wonder if you could confirm, my understanding is that in terms of each planning application, the decision is made upon the conditions of that application at that time. A decision in one case doesn't necessarily set a precedent for dealing with other cases. Am I right?
Yes, you're correct. The starting point is each application is assessed on its own merits.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Debate, councillors. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we find a developer coming to us either before or after a decision and saying, oh no, we can't do this, particularly on social housing. I mean, in this particular case, the developer has gone into the application with their eyes wide open. They knew what they were taking on. They said, yes, we can deliver this, and now clearly they can't. It's no good deciding, 2 years down the line that, oh no, we suddenly can't build social housing because we can't find anybody to take them on. Always should have been part of a boundary work and as part of the application. If they couldn't find anybody to take on the housing, then they should have been up front and said, no, we can't do this, but we will give you X amount. As we've already heard this evening, there was a lot of support from the, support for the application from the local residents because of the inclusion of social housing. Now they're turning around saying, oh no, we can't do that, it's too difficult. It's frustrating. It's obviously very distressing for the local residents who are being denied what they thought was going to take place. Now, in the recommendation here tonight, okay, they're not going to build the houses, but they say, yes, we can give you 1.35 million. Condition 1 on page 11 says, be ready to enable a financial contribution to be paid to Harlow District Council to be used for the purposes of off-site provision of affordable housing with preference given to use of the contribution in the Old Harlow area. Well, I'm sorry, but with preference to Old Harlow doesn't really cut the mustard. People were expecting social housing in Churchgate Street, or at least in Old Harlow. We're merely saying here, well, possibly if the site comes up, we might be able to do it. I'm afraid that does not cut the mustard. This is being recommended by officers. It's going to be very difficult to overturn it. Is there, okay, it's a question. Is there any way of strengthening that recommendation? For example, to say that it has to be spent in Old Harlow, and if they can't do it in 2 years, well, it can be used elsewhere. At least we will get social housing in Old Harlow, providing it's done within 2 years.
Yes, Councillor Carter, so I mean, if you was to move an amendment, I'm sure we could find a suitable form of words to say that we would absolutely look to make sure it was done in Old Harlow within the first 2 years, and if no site became available in that time, which I think is unlikely, we move that?
I think you probably said it more eloquently than I could. So yes, I will formally move that the funding is spent within Old Harlow, only within 2 years. When's the deadline going to start?
Would be from today.
The date the
Right.
decision's issued.
Right.
2 years
So
from
we're
today.
looking-
If no site was found within 2 years of today, then we would look at another site within Harlow. But there's a high likelihood we would be able to find a site within Old Harlow.
And presumably there would be council support in searching for such sites.
Absolutely. So I mean, as members of the public might not be aware, but housing is top of the council's key list of priorities.
Right.
Did somebody want to second that motion?
I'll
I'll second
second that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other debate?
I just, sorry, in seconding it, I mean, I think we all, you know, across all parties, we're all well aware of the need for an increased amount of social housing. That's both in Old Harlow and that's also, right the way, across the town. Let us be, very clear that's what we're seeking to achieve. We've arrived at a situation, and I think it's more than encouraging to hear from people in the Old Harlow area to be saying how they want a provision of social housing within the Old Harlow area, and to have a mix of a range of housing, a mix of housing across the town. So that's to be encouraged. It is unfortunate, to say the least, that because of the in part because of the relaxation of the various sort of planning laws, etc., there are increasingly a number of various ways that developers can go back on what appear to be previous agreements, etc., and the council then becomes increasingly limited about what it can and what it cannot do under the law. But it is actually, and if Mr. Halfon wants to be helpful, then perhaps Mr. Halfon needs to go back and be lobbying his government about doing something about that. Take politics out of this. So just going back to the question of the provision of the housing here, I think what is being suggested in terms of the use of this money and in this effectively the cascading effect we're starting off with a very difficult position. I think we could move towards a very exciting provision whereby social housing is provided within the Old Harlow area, and the use of that money will enable that to happen. So let's all go forward on that.
Councillor Clark?
Yes, thank you.
Turn the microphone.
We have already had precedents whereby we have lost social housing altogether. The advantage of this is, without being too mercenary, we've got 1.3 million, and we know that flats are definitely, as has been argued, on average, if we've got 200,000 per dwelling, that is more than enough for managing our social housing, and we're going to be able to compensate. I think the amendment is a good one because it strengthens the argument about in Old Harlow. So all in all, I think reluctantly somewhat, but nevertheless I think we should welcome it overall as a way forward rather than nothing at all, which is what we were confronted with.
Councillor Long?
Thank you, Chair. What concerns me when it comes to this development is, one, as Councillor Charles said earlier on, is when it comes to the prices of these outward flats that are going up in Churchgate Street. Harlow is like low income working class town, and what concerns me, there's families in this town that will not be able to afford them sort of prices. And I've heard tonight, all of us have said it, Old Harlow and the word Harlow. I've heard there's going to be social houses built. Well, number one should be Harlow, right? So if this goes through, then we should make sure that it's Harlow that benefits from it.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Todd.
I think I reluctantly concur with my colleague. I think it's disappointing that developers haven't been able to come forward, and I will give them the dues. They didn't have to come forward until the 5 years is up, so fair play, they've been honest, and I will give them their dues for that, because not all developers are honest in their positions when some of these things, they've come forward and straight away and said, and worked with the council, and I do give some weight to that. I think that government planning policy needs to look seriously. The relaxation around social housing has an impact on what we can do as a committee and what the council can do. And we need social housing, there is no doubt about this. This was agreed in the principle of that. So I would give fair dues for they come forward early. And you know what? If this is the best agreement we can get, then this council will step up with the developers let us down, and we will build social housing in Old Harlow, and I'm fully confident that we'll be able to do that within the time frame that this committee is allowing. But I do feel that, you know, the land in Harlow, and when we have these and look at our local plan, we need developers to look at seriously this social housing and affordable housing. I understand the difficulties in conversion, slightly different from the new build. But the people of Old Harlow, the people of Harlow are desperate with a huge waiting list. And the council will step in when developers have let us down in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Any more? In that case, if we could move to the vote, all those in favour of the amended recommendations on page 11, which obviously include the recommendation that we'll cascade starting with Old Harlow for 2 years, and then if we can't find a suitable site within Old Harlow, we'll move to some other area in town, and we will work up the exact wording post meeting. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much.